Today we are back with the repertorial rubrics, and on this day of where the holy festival is going on, we all are in the lighter mood and talking about that something just opposite to it and taking it seriously. It seems to be odd, but I feel that it is important that we must understand the meaning of the word serious, which is also present in our repertory as a rubrics. So the word serious originates from the Latin serious, which means grave, weighty, important and earnest. In classical Latin usage, it denotes something that carried moral and existential significance as opposed to the triviality and or playfulness. The old French Serex and later Middle English, the word retained the connotations of gravity and solemnity, and over time, the psychological and clinical context, serious evolved to indicate emotional gravity, lack of cheerfulness, reserved temperament, thought on reflective dispositions, and absence of lightheartedness. In repertorial language, especially in classical homeopathy literature, the term does not merely indicate sadness. It signifies the state of inward concentrations, gravity of mind, or earnest dispositions which may or may not be pathological. The serious must be differentiated from sadness, melancholy, anxiety, gloominess, and apathy and depressions. In repertorial language, the nuisance matters greatly. Friends, in classical repertory, the rubrics appear under mind serious. It indicates mental characterized by lack of laughter, aversion to frivolity, grave facial expressions, and reserved demeanor, depth of thoughts, moral earnest, and the rubrics is subtle. It does not necessarily imply pathology. It may describe a constitutional trait, a reaction of stress, and miasmatic depth, a compensatory mental adaptations. So under this rubrics require psychological insight and clinical sensitivity and miasmatic awareness. Then in ancient Western thoughts, the Greek philosophy temperament classifications include the melancholy type described by Hippocrates and later elaborated by Galen. The melancholic was serious, thoughtful, reserved, inclined to contemplations. And this temperament aligned closely with what repertory described under the serious. In the medieval European thoughts, the medieval thought theology, seriousness was linked to moral responsibility, spiritual introspections, and ascetic temperament. And monist personality were often described as serious and solemn. Renuncia to enlightenment in psychological discourses, seriousness was associated with intellectual depth, philosophical temperament, reserved aristocratic behavior, and later psychiatry differentiated seriousness from depressive states. In the classical homeopathy in 19th century, many remedies showed serious dispositions, thoughtful mood, lack of playfulness, and gravity of expressions. This was recorded by early masters Samuel Hahnemann, James Tyler Kent, and Boniface. Kent especially emphasized seriousness as constitutional expressions rather than merely symptomatic sadness. In the Indian historical and cultural perspective, seriousness is closely associated with gambhirta, maun, silence, and dhyan, contemplations. And classical Indian text Upanishad traditions, seriousness was linked with the spiritual depth, withdrawal from worldly frivolity, and inner awareness. The Ayurvedic temperament classifies it as a Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. A serious temperament may appear high sattvic individual, deep, calm, and thoughtful, and tamasic individual, dull, withdrawal, grave. Thus, seriousness may be either elevated or the pathological. Social expressions in Indian context, it may be valued under the responsible eldest children, a scholar, a spiritual aspirant, and authority figure. However, excessive seriousness in children may indicate suppressed joy, fear, early responsibility, and emotional repressions. In the religious reference includes in the Hinduism, seriousness is associated with tapasya, austerity, brahmacharya, discipline, and dharma adherence. Spiritual aspirants are described as grave or composed. The Christianity traditions, seriousness reflects moral gravity, repentance, and spiritual watchfulness. In Buddhism, seriousness aligns with mindfulness, non-attachment, and observational awareness. However, Buddhist teachers also warns against rigidity or emotional suppression. Thus, religious seriousness may be virtuous if conscious and balanced, and pathological if joyless and rigidity. The psychologically seriousness may represent healthy seriousness, that is intellectual depth, reflective nature, emotional stability, moral responsibility, and introversions. And pathological seriousness are loss of spontaneity, emotional repressions, anhedonia, and fear of vulnerability, and excess responsibility, chronic anxiety masked by composure. And the body language, serious persons may display minimal facial movement, composed posture, slow speech, reduced laughter, and direct gaze or downcast gaze. Inner experience, patient may describe, I cannot joke much. I feel responsible for everything. I think too deeply. I don't like childish behavior. The related cross references are seriousness versus sad. Serious are grave but not necessarily unhappy. Sadness are emotional sorrow. Serious are thoughtful, and sadness is depressed mood. And serious may be stable, and sad is often tearfulness. Then serious versus melancholy. Melancholy includes despair, hopelessness, and self-blame, and seriousness may lack despair. Seriousness versus gloomy. Gloominess includes negative expectations, darkness of outlook, and seriousness may remain neutral. Seriousness versus reserved. Reserved are socially withdrawal. Serious are emotionally grieved. And seriousness versus reflective. Reflective are thinking, and seriousness emotional grave plus thinking. So these are the differences that we can do, and we have to do so to arrive at the most similar rubrics. The miasmatic analysis, soric seriousness are thoughtful, conscientious, moral responsibility, and mild and grave. Syphilitic are extreme gravity, despairing depth, fatalist, severe rigidity, and psychotic seriousness are suppressed emotions, hiding inner security, overcompositions through irresponsibility, and tubercular seriousness in internal conflict, serious yet restless, and intellectual with intensity. The seriousness must be evaluated in the miasmatic context also. The clinical presentations in children does not play freely, look older than age, rarely laughs, and take responsibility early. Adolescence, moral rigidity, academic intensity, perfectionist behavior, aversion to fun. In adult, work-centered, emotionally content, and limited humor, and difficult in relaxing. The patient's expressions and verbal clues are during the case taking observed tone of voice, measured and firm, minimal gestures, structured answer, controlled emotional expressions. And commonly verbal clues are I don't like wasting time, life is serious, I cannot laugh easily, I think deeply about the consequence. The remedy under this rubrics are important remedies are Aurum metallicum. It is a profound, serious moral responsibility, religious intensity, and self-criticism. Characteristic symptoms are suicidal thoughts from failure, feels worthy, and a strong sense of duty, and it is syphilitic. Natrum are reserved seriousness, emotional suppressions, dwells on past grief, and characteristic symptoms are aversion to consolation, silent suffering, and weeps alone. So it is sorrow-psychotic. Calcarea card, our nature is serious from responsibility, anxiety about future, and fear of failure. Characteristics are fear of insanity, perspirations on head, and fatigue easily. Miasm is soric. Then Lycopodium, nature is serious with hidden insecurity, intellectual gravity, irritable when contradicted. And then characteristics are 4 to 8 pm aggravations, right-sided symptoms, and fear of public performance. Miasm is psychotic. Ignatia, nature is serious after grief, contradictory mood, suppressed emotions, and and characteristic features are sighing, globus hystericus, silent grief, and miasm is tubercular. The Silicea patients are nature are quiet seriousness, conscientious, reserved, and the characteristic symptoms are lack of confidence, chilly patients, and perspiring feet, and miasm is tubercular and psychotic. These are the remedy, but there are many other remedies also that you can read with and try to identify in context of these rubrics. The identification during the case taking to identify true serious rubrics. First, you have to observe the spontaneous behavior. Does the patient smile naturally? Ask indirect questions. What makes you laugh? How do you relax? And evaluate the consistency. Is seriousness constitutional or situational? Then cross-check with general sleep pattern, fears, social interactions, ambitions, and miasmatic ambitions. And miasmatic depth in seriousness is mild or destructive. So differential strategy in repertory. When using repertory, confirm with concomitant rubrics, avoid prescribing on single symptoms, combine with general and physical symptoms, and identify constitutional base. And so seriousness is often misunderstood. It may represent emotional maturity, repressed grief, chronic stress, moral conflict, hidden depressions, high responsibility. So we have to differentiate between the temperamental and seriousness, pathological emotional suppressions, and miasmatic depressions. So friends, this rubrics represents a profound psychological states rather than superficial behavioral pattern, and it indicates moral earnestness, constitutional gravity, suppressed emotionality, miasmatic depth, spiritual intensity, and clinical mastery lies in observing facial expressions, listening to tone, identifying suppressed joy, and correlating with with physical general, and understanding miasmatic base. So, and then only we can have a accurate selected rubrics. Then seriousness may hide silent grief in Natrum, moral depressions in Aurum, fearful responsibility in Calcarea, intellectual insecurity in Lyco, and grief suppression in Ignatia, and conscientious sensitivity in Silicea. So seriousness must not be judged, it must be understood. In classical homeopathy, depth of perceptions determines the depth of cure. Seriousness is not merely a facial expression, it is a window into the patient's inner philosophy of the life. So this is about the serious people, and I have tried to explain it in details. We shall keep on learning these rubrics, and other rubrics also. And if you want to listen me in Hindi also, you can go to my Facebook or to my YouTube channel, where there are many more rubrics placed there. So with this, today I conclude the session. We shall come back again with the next time. Thank you very much.